Hello, I'm Gabby. Welcome to the Happier Life Project, brought to you by mental health and wellness app My Possible Self in partnership with the Priory Healthcare. Now, full disclosure, the interview I did with today's guest, Alex Bottomley, we ended up splitting into two parts as we covered a lot of ground. So in today's episode, we are learning about somatic therapy, which I confess, until I chatted to Alex, I didn't know much about. Somatic therapy incorporates the mind, body and spirit into therapeutic healing work, treating the effects of PTSD, trauma and other mental and emotional health issues through the connection between the mind and the body. Somatic therapy aims to help release how our body holds on to stress, tension and trauma, rather than only resolving problems verbally, like in talking therapy such as CBT. By learning the foundations of somatic therapy today, you will be equipped with the necessary information to really make the most out of next week's podcast episode, to which Alex and I explore learning to love ourselves and build self-compassion using some of the tools and strategies from somatic therapy. Alex is a highly experienced somatic therapist who works mainly with women to help them transform their trauma and return to body connection. She's very passionate about what she does, and shortly you will hear how somatic therapy was life-changing in Alex's own personal journey, working through trauma and her relationship with her body. It was fascinating to explore, and we really only scratched the surface. So ready to learn about somatic therapy and find a healthier, happier you? Then let's get started. Hi, Alex Bottomley. Welcome to the Happier Life Project.
Thank you.
You are. You are. And here we go. A somatic therapist working with passionate, curious, soulful women to recognise and come back into their wholeness. Your mission is to really help them feel safe in being a whole human. You work with women to transform trauma and return to their body connection so that they can experience a greater sense of compassion and live life with more freedom and ease. That already is quite alien to me. I've got to be honest. So I definitely want to dig into that. A bit more about you first, though. I offer a space for my clients where they can feel empowered by their body, have the tools to regulate their nervous system and transform trauma so that they can live life in the way they want to and show up authentically in the world in their full humanness. So it's really getting into your body then.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. I've heard the term somatic therapy recently, but I've no idea really exactly what it is. I know it's about mind-body connection, and that's where my knowledge sort of starts and finishes. I did do a little bit of Googling because it's obviously your jam. So somatic therapy operates off the idea that what happens to you in your life is stored not only in your mind, but also in your body. So in your work as a somatic therapist, what do you do? What does this entail?
Yeah, and I thank you for the introduction, first of all. It is quite new and alien to people, and I think we'll get into that in a little bit about, we're not taught how to listen to our bodies. We don't live in a world where we operate from the body. It's all up, within our mind. Mind comes first. Thoughts and mindset are believed to be kind of where we operate from. And so I guess, first of all, just explaining that somatic comes from the Greek word soma, which means of the body. So when we're talking about somatic therapy, therapy of the body, we're using the body as this vehicle, this place, this source of information. And somatic and embodiment can kind of be interchanged if you kind of see both of these words getting used, and there's so much kind of nuance to it, but they are the same, but also different. my kind of view on it is somatic therapy is the means to a deeper embodiment. We can use somatic therapy to learn how to feel more, to come into a greater sense of knowing what our embodiment is, knowing what our felt experience is.
I'm just curious then, in terms of like how you would apply somatic therapy to a client that's coming to you for a certain, say, issue, problem, struggle. And also it makes me think, because it's focusing on the body, that it's a physical type of therapy, but I am saying that with a question mark in my voice and hoping you can clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also just want to talk about that somatics can be explored in many different ways. There might be more kind of movement somatic practitioners. There might be Pilates teachers that operate under the umbrella of somatics. But somatic therapy is, coming into that therapeutic relationship, that exploration, just as we would if we were to go to talking therapy. So kind of maybe making that clarification that what people might go to talking therapy about, they will also come to somatic therapy about.
That's really interesting, because the episode before this one, I learned all about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a form of talking therapy. So that's really interesting that you would go to a somatic therapist for the same kind of problems that you would do a CBT therapist.
Yeah, everything really that people go to. And I'll explain a little bit more why as we get into it a little bit. But I guess your question on, is it touch? Is it body work? Can include it, but also not. I work with my clients mainly online. And so what it is about, and I think I can explain more about what the essence of it is rather than what we actually do, because it can be very different. And it's such a nuanced topic. There's no black and white. There's no this or that. Essentially, we are slowing down. We are creating an environment where, and that's an internal environment where we can start to listen to the language of the body, the language of sensation, the language of felt sense, which is a language that I think we all know, but that we've forgotten, that we're not really in touch with.
Like intuition, or like a gut, something in the gut.
Absolutely. A felt experience. So like you say, when we feel sad, how do you know you feel sad? Maybe there's a lump in your throat. Maybe there's something that happens in your belly, when we're angry. I always say, how do you know? How do you know you feel that way? It's not, we've not pulled something out of thin air. We're not just decided I'm angry.
Yeah.
Something's telling you that, whether it's tension, whether it's a heat that rises in your body, whether it's your heart that's starting to beat. And so all of this is felt sense. And when we start to track those sensations, when we really give space to them, which I really know this can sound so abstract, but when we give space to some of that, the body starts to process in a way that it knows how to. So often we disrupt the natural cycle of the natural processes of what the body needs to complete. A stress cycle, our nervous system, our body goes into an activation and actually can process it on its own given the right environment. We might run, we might fight, we might need to kick and scream just for that kind of that kind of example.
Release.
But so release in some sort of way, discharge. But we don't often always have that right environment, the safe environment to do it.
So we suppress.
Yeah. And it's not we don't do it to ourselves. it's such a physiological experience. It's not safe to do it. We don't have the environment to be able to process that. So what we offer in somatic therapy is a space for the body to just start to really be able to process in the way that it needs to and knows how to on its own. So yeah, it's really about listening to body echoes, listening to body sensations, slowing right down so that we can feel, so that we can also build our experience of safety. You know, the body needs to feel safe, not just think we're safe, not just tell ourselves, you know, hand on heart, I am safe. That's not necessarily enough to change the physiology of feeling safe.
There's so much my mind is thinking of right now. But one thing that I am thinking about is, I think it was another podcast I listened to with, I think it was like a psychotherapist actually, that was explaining she'd been in quite a traumatic car accident and she had her kids in the car. Luckily, none of them were hurt, physically hurt at least. But I think the car did roll over. It sounded awful. And the first thing she did was she made the kids get out of the car and shake. She wanted to shake off. She was like, we're not keeping this because otherwise this is going to have detrimental effects for years to follow. So she made them like shake out their body from like top to toe so that this trauma that had just happened. And I was like, well, it makes sense, but it's also kind of bizarre, I suppose, to anybody that's just seen this happen. But she was like, you know, and that's what we did and it worked. Yeah.
And, you know, I hear you saying it's so bizarre, and like it's a natural reaction, right, of most of us, and like me definitely before I kind of moved into any of this. And I think it really highlights the disconnection that we have from our primal needs and our primal experience. There's a quite a famous known video on YouTube amongst the trauma somatic world, which is where a polar bear gets shot, and it's I should rephrase that.
Gosh.
It's not, they don't hurt the polar bear. It's done in a contained kind of way. So for anyone worried about animal cruelty,
it's to frighten the bear.
It's to demonstrate. Yeah, I don't quite know what they get in with.
Fire.
But basically, it's to demonstrate that the nervous system, and this is the same that what happens in humans. And this polar bear, when it's shot, kind of goes into this freeze response. And after a bit of space and a bit of time, its body starts to tremble, shake, like you just said about this example in the car. Polar bear takes a few huge breaths, big, massive regulatory breaths, and then just gets on with its day. And, you know,
wow.
Imagine a world where
we could do the same.
Have the safety to do that, but you know, we don't. And I guess there's so much that we
Wow, this is really fascinating stuff. Well, I'm sort of going to segue into something you said on your website. You support people on their journey to living a more conscious, connected life. So where did this desire to help others who suffer come from, basically?
My own suffering, my own, pain and searching, I guess. It was just an evolution of my journey. And
can we talk a bit about your journey? I mean, you were very open on your website saying that you really used to dislike yourself, which unfortunately, especially with women, I think so many of us feel exactly the same way, and we develop different, I would say, maybe coping mechanisms to whether it's masking it or, you know, being a high achiever, or, you know, pick your own adventure. Yeah, I'd love to know a bit about your story.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm actually just pulling off from my website a little bit as well. I think it's just important here to share a little bit of a definition of what trauma is, because I think so many of us, so many people feel like they've never experienced trauma because they view trauma as this one big life event. You know, maybe war, you know, something that's really, really quite far away from their home, or maybe it's, you know, abuse of some sort. But many people hear the word trauma, don't connect with it. And trauma, I mean, there's so many definitions that we can look for and look out online, but trauma isn't the experience. It's not the event itself. It's what happens within our system. It's the adaptations. It's the overwhelm in the nervous system. That is the trauma. So I just want to make that clarification first of all. Trauma is a human experience. You know, my belief that every human has experienced trauma of some degree. Yeah, I want to put that there first of all. And my story always seems to begin when I was 15, when my dad died. And that is actually maybe what we would consider
big trauma.
Big trauma. You know, it's an event. And it's interesting actually how I always thought that everything kind of that followed on from that, I guess that's where my healing journey began as well. I thought that everything was about that. And the more that I kind of moved forward, I actually started to realize and understand that there's a lot that came before that. You know, I grew up in a very loving family. Both parents are together. Went on holidays, went to gymnastics, you know, had a great group of friends at school, had a really good life. But yet still there was a lot of, you know, core needs that didn't get met when I was younger. My mum wasn't able to, is progressively better at now. Yeah, she does a lot of work on herself actually, but she wasn't able to hold the complexity of emotions. She didn't like when I was upset. She didn't like when I was angry. So I wasn't able to learn how to be with intensity. Not only that, it was hard to show my mum my true feelings because I learned that she couldn't cope, you know. And
that's
the trauma.
Familiar.
That's the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a generational thing as well. We are getting better at it, aren't we? But
yeah. You know, from there, for me, and this is all happening, you know, underneath. I don't know about this.
Right.
But spend so much life trying to really be seen, to try and really get your family, your friends to kind of really see the depths of you. But yeah, at the same time, so afraid to show that, because you know that if you get, in my case, if I was too sad, if I was too angry, I wouldn't receive the love that I needed, that I, you know, needed as a core pillar of our safety as a human being. So we begin to just hide who we truly are. It begins so early.
Were you by any chance from like a smaller town?
Yeah, I'm from in between Manchester and Liverpool, so two big cities either side.
Which one?
Warrington.
Oh, Warrington. I'm St Anne's.
Do you know, I was listening to one of the other podcasts and I thought, Gabby sounds a bit too close, not too close to home, but I'm like, she can't be. Yeah.
Oh, we're down the road. I don't know where you are now, but sometimes I just think again, like if you're a little bit different as well, because if you come from those kind of towns where a lot of people like to, and that's completely fine, they want to stay in the area and they want to have a family and they want to, you know, again, it's choose your own adventure. But if you sort of are a little bit different in what you want to do career wise, or if you want to travel? I mean, for me, I was the black sheep of the family for sure. And again, that made it really difficult to connect with family. And yeah, I would suppress for sure who I really was, because it didn't make sense to the rest of the family fold. Which I obviously realised later on in life, because again, it's a work in process, isn't it, to build that kind of stuff in when you're an adult. But back to you.
Yeah. You know, you only have your own experience, and I think we all think we're a bit different. You know, we all have that. But yeah, I definitely wanted to, you know, I always wanted to leave the family. I wanted to move to London. Always wanted to move to London the second that I could. And yeah, I guess it's partly when my dad died, my mum got a new partner super quick, 3 months later. And
oh yes, that is quick.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, that's been a lot of learning and understanding, and having to develop compassion towards her, and, you know, learning that we can both understand why someone's done something and still be really fucking angry about it. Yeah. And really hurt. Yeah.
So then, did it come to a head where, how did it manifest this? Obviously, there's the big T, isn't it? The big T and little t, they call it, big trauma and smaller trauma. But it sounds like there was an amalgamation of both kind of going on. Did it come to a point where you got unwell, or, you know, there's usually a catalyst, isn't there, where things have to change?
Yeah. So for as long as I can remember, and again, I think as long as I can remember always goes back to being 15, food was a challenge. Eating, overeating, restrictions around food, for such a long time. And you know, what often that comes paired with is relationship to body. There's not one without the other. And that was always my battle, you know, the most prominent one. Just when I think about it now, I felt imprisoned. I felt so trapped, and actually trapped by the thoughts and the shame, but also by the way that it impacted my body. I was completely immobilized. I wasn't able to get on with anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't change anything. And for so long, and at this point, you know, I am searching high and low for the answer to this. I'm going to, you know, every kind of therapy, holistic therapy, all the spiritual spaces, everywhere, you know, bought every book, read 5 pages, every online course. And also it would perpetuate the shame, because anything that I tried wouldn't work, and it would always come back to, well, there must be something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. Why can't today I just, you know, eat healthily? Why can't today I just love my body, or go to the gym, or whatever it was?
And it's such a miserable cycle to be in, isn't it? Because then you just want the sugar, right? Or the carbs, and then you beat yourself up again. Yeah,
it's awful. It's really awful. And I actually had, first of all, a therapist, traditional talking therapy, that brought a lot of support, because she wasn't a somatic therapist, but there was a nod to inviting in the body for some inquiry. So that was definitely kind of a real big step. But the shift, the real change for me happened when I started to look at healing through a nervous system trauma-informed lens. I started to understand that what was happening to me was a survival response. I couldn't get on. I couldn't change. I couldn't go to the gym, or I couldn't because I was completely immobilized. I was frozen, shut down. There was no energy in my system. So it wasn't that I personally was doing anything wrong. It was that my system was actually in this response, which I started to learn, and I think so many people that I work with end up learning that this is a really normal response to the abnormal experiences that I've had. And it can give a lot of, relief and actually a lot of compassion developed in just that aspect.
How long did it take you to get to this place of, it sounds like, I mean, for anybody, even just acceptance is great, but then to actually appreciate and honor your body and enjoy it, I mean, that must have taken so much work. It's probably an ongoing process as well, I'd imagine. Otherwise, we'd all be signing up, wouldn't we?
I don't want to create this illusion that, it's all sunshine and roses. I think that the difference is that, I still have days where, where there might be some body shame, but the difference is the response to it. What would once spiral and pull me down and mean that I can't move off the sofa for days on end is now very different. I now know and I'm aware of what I need in that moment, what's going to support me, and that compassion is there. And I also just want to say, because you're asking about, must have taken a long time, or how long did it take? And I guess it took from the moment that I always say, from the 15-year-old self to now. I think everything's been part of it, but the real progression, I think, or the real turning point where things started to land was, it didn't take that long once I was on the somatic path.
Right.
And it's such a slow way of approaching things, but that I see it as the slow way is the fast way.
Right.
For 10 years, I'd been searching here, there, and everywhere, but maybe the 1 year where I'd found somatic therapy, it was
a game changer.
Life altering.
So then obviously that huge transformation, I guess, it's even though, we're talking about body, I think it's a mental transformation most of all, probably is the biggest one, right?
Yeah. So something about somatic therapy I didn't mention is it's a bottom-up approach. We work with the body to, create changes within our thoughts, within our mind, within our story. And actually our emotional brain, our body brain works something like 80,000 times faster than our thinking brain. So much faster. And we also receive through the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body. I don't know if listeners might be aware of that, but definitely something to go and look into. 80% of messages from this nerve, which impacts every system in our body, 80% travels from body to brain. So our body does impact so much of our thought and our story. It's happening in the body first, in the nervous system.
So then do clients come to you with more physical symptoms than mental? Is it a combination? What are some of the more common issues that you work with your clients on through somatic therapy?
For me personally, mainly emotional. Some of them do impact the physical, people with chronic pain, chronic tension in their body, but mainly I work with the emotional, the constant anxiety, inability to make decisions, living in a constant state of panic. I've worked with people with chronic health anxiety, who feel that any sensation in their body is a sign of an illness or a disease. I work with women with eating disorders, body shame, overworking, people pleasing, like I said earlier, anything that you might think that you'll go to a talking therapist with is the same.
Hiya, thank you for making it to the end of this episode of the Happier Life Project with me, Gabby Sanderson. To learn more about somatic therapy and work with Alex, head to her website, which is alexbottomley.com. And please do make sure you look out for next week's follow-up episode with Alex, where we pick up from where we left off today, focusing on learning to love ourselves and build self-compassion. Now, this is important. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is free to download, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review if you found this episode helpful or interesting. And to find and follow us on social media, we are at My Possible Self, and I've been at Radio Gabby on Instagram and Twitter. So do take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.